Good morning, Kumlera Black Gemara. Today's daf is daf Dalid. And basically, we're focusing on the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says that by Menachos, by flower offerings, has the same dinim as by Karbonis, that if you did it Shaloi Lishma or Loi Lishma, we say that the carbon is a valid carbon, just you haven't filled your nether, except when it comes to a sin mincha. Because just like by a sin offering by an animal, we say if it's Loi Lishma, it's puzzle. We had a machlekes regarding the ocean, but by a chatz, say it's puzzle. The thing the Korban Pesach. So the same thing you buy a carbon mincha. So it says the Gemara of Dalit on an olive for about 10 lines on the top of the page by the two dots. Chutz minchas chayte. So if somebody was a sinner, there's carbon oil of the yeda, the fluctuating carbon commensurate to your economic status. So the three avedas there, shvu is bita, if you made a shvua, or if you went into the base of Migdash and you didn't know you were tamei, and so on and so forth. So if you cannot afford an animal or a bird, you bring a mincha. So it's a chatas basically, but it's in a mincha form. And then you have minchas kanois, which is what a saita you bring by a saita to determine, whether she committed adultery or not. Says the Gemara, and you tell me that these two exceptions, if you did Lishma, you're not only having you fulfilled your neder. It's a possible carbon. Says the Gemara, I understand why minchas chayte is an exception, because chatas kayrach mana. The Torah itself refers to it as a chatas, because it says in the pasuk, by the carbon oil if you cannot afford the birds and all that, you should bring a mincha instead. And then the pasuk says, but la yasim la shemen, you shouldn't place an oil on it, but la yitna la levina, no frankincense and so on. Why ki chatas he? Because it is a chatas. So the Torah openly declares that a carbon chatas, so it has the same thing obviously as a chatas. But my problem is minchas kanois. Minchas kanois is nothing to do with a chatas. We're not atoning anybody's aveda or anything else. It's the idea to discern whether she committed an aveda or not. Is min alon. How do you know that it's included as well? Don't do with chatas. Says the Gemara, I'll tell you how we know. The Tana Kamera Nach was once one of the Talmidim of Nach was teaching him, was saying over some brises, and he mentioned a brise which says the following: that minchas kanois. What happens by a mincha of a seita? That you set aside $100 for the mincha you're going to bring, and of course you got on sale for $80. You have $20 surplus. What do you do with that money? Is meiser the leftover money you buy something, an animal, something that you can put on the mizbeach when it's free, and kates on mizbeach. It's dessert from mizbeach. That's what the Brisa said. So Amalei, so Rav Nachman commented, you're right. And how do you? Why it makes sense? You know why? Because we have the same thing by Karma Chatas. By Karma Chatas, even though we know the 5 Chatois have mesas of the owner die, it's chaper already. We don't bring the Chatas, just let the Chatas die. But if you had surplus money, you set aside $100, you have $20 left over. What do you do with that money? The same thing. So we're going to learn minchas kanos from. Yeah. So this is what Anachla said. Maskeres oven ksivba. It says the word oven by the Mitzvah Kenois. Uber Chatos ksiv by Chatos it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was upset with I don't know why they burnt over the carbon. He said, I gave this to you to atone for the Avain Eda of the sin of the Eda. So because it says over here oven by Mitzvah Kenois. So here oven by Chatos is Ma Chatos Moshe Dova Moshe Dova. So now that we have Exer Shava, and we're learning Kanois from Chatas, so we'll go a step further. Just like we know by Chatas, if you did Lishma, it's possible. Is Av Mitcha Kanoi Psula Shaloi Lishma. Simple as that. Why? Because you have Exer Shava oven. Nothing to do with Chatas, but now that
it's very different.
Exer
Shava because it's.
But once you have
has to bring it to establish guilt or
yeah, I know it's irrelevant when it comes to Gzei Shava. You can't ask a question. Now you have Gzei Shava oven. We compare the two, and we are learning one halacha from there. You see, the Braisa clearly says, how does the Braisa know that Moshe Nadava from the Gzei Shava oven? So once you have Gzei Shava, you go a step further. That's what the Gemara thinks right now. Following that logic, so too an osham yehi puzzle by carbon by animals. We had a machlekes, but the Tanakama there says clearly in osham that if you did loy l'shmoy, the animal is kosher. So one Tana said that it's not kosher. By mincha, we don't even bring that Tana. By mincha, we say that the only exception is minchas chatos and mincha kanois. What about an osham? Should be possible shalai lishma. The Gama, let's learn out over osham. Should be possible shalai lishma. So Gemara says if you look closely by osham, it doesn't say oven, it says avoina. Donin oven me oven ve'ain donin oven Donin oven ma'amen ve'ein doni oinoi ma'aven. The word oven, which is written by Mitchanois, the word oven by Chatas, we learn. But avoinoi, which says over there by Asham, we don't learn from that. That's a different word altogether. Says the Gemara. I have two questions on that. You tell me because one letter is different, it no longer is a Shabbos. So this is a famous Gemara we bring all the time. First of all, my nafkamino, who cares if it's exactly or not? Rabbi Shmuel taught us when it comes to Gzei Shabbos, it says, sorry. It says, V'shav hakoyin uvo hakoyin. When it comes to a mitzvah, so the kohen goes in the first time on the walls and wants to see if it's spread or not. And then he circles and everything else. Then he comes back a second time. And we said, just like the first time he comes, he scrapes off the wall and removes all the tzaras, and then we see if it comes back. The second time he does the same thing. And how do you know? You have Gzei Shava. The first time it says V'shava kohen, he returns. And the next time it says Uba kohen, and he comes. And we make Gzei Shava. The word is not even the same. There's in fact nothing similar between the two. No, the context is the same. Zuhi Shiva, Zuhi Bia. So Gzei Shava doesn't have to be exactly the same. And B'frat Ovan and Avoina, how different are they from each other? Even though Tais already alludes to the fact that many times throughout Shas we say that if you have a choice of learning which are exactly the same, or if it's slightly different, you'll always tend to learn exactly the same. As Taisa says, that's only when they're mutually exclusive. You can't learn both Gzei Shabbos, so you have to have a choose which one you're going to learn. Obviously, we opt for the one that's exactly the same. But over here, they're not mutually exclusive. One was to teach you that Mizch Kanois is similar to Chatas, and now we want to learn an additional thing that Osham also is similar. So who cares if it's exactly the same or not? That's question number one. Question number two, let's make another Gzei Shabbos. Well, if you say, if you know Adis and you refrain from sharing that Adis and you swear that it never happened, to be your lie, and says v'nasa avoinoi, and that's a chatas from the Yidit. There's even lo yag v'nasa avoinoi, same thing. Now, even though in Gemara's Vach, remember we had a whole sugya there. If something, we went through every single way of learning something. If you learn something not directly in the Torah, but you learn it from one of the klolim in the Torah, can you now pass it on to through another klal? And one of the questions was, and most of them were not resolved. And one of them was, if you learn something from a binyanav, similarity, a memitzinu, can you then pass it on with Gzei Shava? And the Gemara remains with a suffix. So the whole inyan of how do you know that these didn't by is because you have Gzei Shava avoinoi from there to oven from chatas. Or similar to chatas, it's a chatas as well. So not the Gzei Shava. It's similar to chatas. We say because of memitzinu, and now you want to learn Gzei Shava something else. So Tez explained that's exactly Mar's question. Either let's learn from there, let's learn Osham from Imla Yagid, and if you're not going to learn, then let's go back into that Gemara there and say, look, something you learned through a Memitzinu or a Binyanav, you cannot then pass it on through a Gzei Shava. By Osham, we're not going to say the same thing that if it's Loy Lishma is possible. So Gemara changes his mind. Gemara changes his whole mind. Says, no, you're right. Let's go back to the beginning. Minchas Kanos, we do not learn from Chatasaro. So how do you know Minchas Kanois if it's Loy Lishma is possible? I'll tell you in a minute. And first of all, but we had a Braisa. Clearly, you do have a Gzei Shava oven that you compare to Chatas, Minchas Kanois. So he said no, because if you're going to use that Braisa the way I'm not going to explain it, then let's go on also to Osham. And the key Gamri Gzei Shava LeMoisha Dovre Gamri. The Braisa only talks about one halacha. The halacha is what do you do with the excess money? That's all we're going to use the Gzei Shava for. You're going to ask me the famous question of we have a rule, once you have Gzei Shava, the whole idea of Gzei Shava is as if that word is written over here. Whatever is there is transcribed over here. So how can you differentiate? No. The Torah clearly has a miyad by chatas, where it says, V'shachat oisol lechatas. It says you should check this. We even had yesterday Gemara as well. The shachat oisa lechatas, and we oisa it as if to say only this and not what. Oisa lishma ksheda shalei lishma ptula. Only this din of lishma only applies here. Lechatas, you have to have a minor karma chatas, only limited to chatas. Avakol koch made lishma ksheda. Tingla yavzei shava. The Torah clearly unravels shava as far as this din is concerned of lechatas lishma. No, so Ella Minchas Chayte Minchas Kanoi the Psalm. Let's go back to the beginning. A Minchas Chayte Minchas is the Apostle Ishmael. No, how do you know? So Gemara says simply Chatas time of my. How do you know by Chatas? It says that Iksi Mishum Iksi Bohi by Korban Chatas by Anosi. It says there that Chatas he. and therefore you have to have in mind the chatas and not v'shlo l'shmoi. Hachinami here too. Haksiv ba he. It says over here also. It says he, because it says over here chatas he, and therefore we say that it has to be l'shma. Nu Osham Nami Haksibehu. By Osham also it says who. This interesting thing. Looking up. It doesn't say, I don't know why. By Osham it says who. By Chatas he, nowhere does it say Chatas he. It says Chatas who. And throughout, we had in this book, and saying bothered me then. We kept on saying who, and nobody makes a comment on the side or anywhere else. That doesn't say he anyway. It says who. Does that mean that and does that mean that the Gemara a reading of it is actually he, not who? Sorry? Oh. So how come they also they changed? They changed back to who? They hedged their bets. They hedged their bets. Anyway, so by Asham it says Hikus HaKayim Mizbeach Ishal Hashem Asham Hu. Talks about V'zois Teres Asham. It said that you're maktir on the Mizbeach Ishal Hashem Asham Hu. It says Asham Hu. So l'chayla, following the logic, when it says who means that you have to have in mind exactly the same thing. So why don't you say that Asham if you did Lo Yishmar Shvi Pasal? Same thing. Does the Gemara no? And we had exact same sugi as well. It says who where does it say the word who? It says the pasuk we hiktir oisa kain hamizbecha. It says he shows hamizbech Asham Hu. Now that avodah of Haktorah is already after you did all the other avodas. And remember, if you don't do Haktorah Emurin, if you don't do that of the Chalavim, it's not Ma'akiv. So if it's not Ma'akiv, you don't do it at all. If you did it like Shema, who cares? So therefore, it can't be that the who over there is being used for that purpose. So the Gemara, it says, the fact is, if you don't bring the murim, it's kosher. So therefore, it can't darshan that if you didn't let Yishmar, you possible by Osham. The other ones, it says he, or it says, you have to have in mind exactly that carbon. Okay. So why talk to say who? Elhu lamali, we could have huna amarab. We need for huna amarab, which is what? Again, we had all those wachim. Osham shenitig l'riyah. What happened to Balabas? You lost it and brought another carbon, doesn't need it anymore. So what do you do with the Osham? You let it wander about, wait till it gets a mum, you sell it, and with the money, you bring karbanos to the mizbech. But it says here, Osham shenitig l'riyah. The Rashi learns that it means literally, you had to give it to a shepherd, and you have to remove the name Osham from it. And therefore now, you can use it, sell it, and all that. So Osham shenitig l'riyah, an Osham that you basically took it away and gave it over to a shepherd to go ahead, because you don't need Osham anymore. The Balabas is chaper through another carbon. Right, and this is a chiluk in Osham and the Chatzah. The Chatzah, these are part of the Chatois HaMeses. By Osham, you let it wander about, and with the money, you sell it. So if you gave it to a roya, and then Mishchot Stam, and then you shechted it, this very animal that originally was an Osham, and you had nothing in mind, kosher. Why? Because we're going to say Lishumayla. Because eventually, what do you do? Yeah, if you had Stam. Why? Because the way Rashi learns, you were menatik it. Since you were menatik it, you gave it over to the shepherd and you removed the name Osham, therefore menastam. What is it? And what are you going to do with it? You're going to take the money and everything else, it becomes an Taisa this totally disagrees, and Taisa holds that even if you did not give it over to Riyah, the moment that you no longer need it for kapara, and when the plan is to use it for money to buy an oil, oil as a dove, automatic even before you gave it to Riyah, if you shech the stam, and the boss we're geyser. We'll make a gzeda, so we don't want that to happen. We're going to wait to give it to the shepherd. But anyway, the animal remains an asham. The animal remains an asham until you menatik it and gave it to you. That's what you do for. But Rav said, now Rav comes and adds a few more exceptions. The mincha of a omer is different than the other. It's not a chatas, it's not a chap or anything. It's a matir or a machshir. It's going to enable us to eat from the chodesh. That's what the mincha of omer is for. So Rav said, Minchas ha'omer should come to Shalishma. On Minchas ha'omer, you did commit and you didn't have a mind Lishma, it's possible. But Mishnah doesn't mention it, but Rav adds another din. Why? The whole purpose of this Mincha is to be mate the Chodesh. But it didn't achieve that, because if it is Lishma, it didn't achieve that. So therefore, what do you do? Nothing. It's a puzzle card. It didn't achieve anything. The same thing applied by Osham Nazir. When a Nazir becomes Tameh, if a Nazir went through the whole Nazirus, you bring an oil and a chatzah of slumming. But if a Nazir became Tameh, he brings an Osham. And what's the purpose of that Osham? To enable him to start counting again. Or Asham Mitzayda. The purpose of an Asham Mitzayda is to enable him that he should go back to the Machane and go back, and he catch him. So these are matidim. They're not kaporas, they are matidim, they're machshidim. The word here is be machshidim. They're all possible. Why? Their only purpose is to enable you to do something, and since it's not enabling you to do it, garnish, so it's possible. So the obvious question is our Mishnah. So now our Mishnah says, it says that all the malachas, right, includes every single mincha, and the only exception is and you're not yaitzer. L'shum chayve, for you're not yaitzer to discharge your neder, you still have to bring whatever. Chutz minchas chayte, mincha nois. The only two exceptions is a mincha v'chayte an elevated, or the mincha v'saita. That's it. Doesn't mention the mincha. Although it doesn't mention the mitzayda, and doesn't mention the nazir, doesn't mention the mincha zaymer. Doesn't mention mincha zaymer. Says the Gemara, three answers. If you're right, then this is why is it mentioned that? Three answers. But first of all, we're only talking about private personal kabbanas. We're not talking about kabbanas tzibur. What's minchas reimer? Totally different category. We're not addressing that. That's answer number one. Number two, a mincha that comes on its own. Remember, we learned the Gagdom of the Rambam. The two kinds of minchas. There's a mincha which is part of the sachim, comes with another animal. You bring wine and you bring a mincha, and then you have the mincha on its own. We're talking about the mincha on its own. Minchas comes with something else. Comes with the lamb as well. Comes together with the zevach. We're not mentioning it. That's answer number two. Answer number three. We're talking about karbanas that you bring whenever you deem fit. You have to bring this carbon, either minchas oila or minchas chayte. When do you bring the minchas chayte? When you did a sin. There's no specific time on the calendar. Or kiktani hanashek vulazman. How do vulazman like tani? This minchas oila is fixed on the second day Pesach. That we're not discussing those kind of karbanas. Different category. Okay, but then Rab added also, besides the mincha, which you had a problem from Mishnah, he also added also those two, because they're machshidim, there was a question, okay, forget mincha, but let's go to the first Mishnah as Zvachim. You have the same identical Mishnah there, same format. And there also again, it says all the animals, in the first Mishnah Zvachim, Kol HaZvachim, they're all kosher, all the Zvachim. You weren't yaitzer, you're neder. Chutz, the only exceptions are Korban Pesach and the Korban Chatas. But according to you should have added Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayda. Forget about the other Tana who says that Asham is also possible. We're talking about the Tana Kama who says that Asham, if you did Lishma, it's a valid carbon. It's not yaitzer. What do you mean? But you just said that not yaitzer, but these two karbanos. The bola hashal because their purpose is to be enabler and we're an enabler, says the Gemara. Because since within the Asham category, some of them will be disqualified, the Sham Naz, the Sham Mitzayda. All other Ashamas are no different than the carbon. If you did let it shmar, it's kosher. The Mishnah wanted to give you rules, didn't want to get into specifics. Therefore, it doesn't raise Asham at all. Because then we'll have to tell you, I'm talking about these two Ashamas. What other Ashamas are kosher? Too many. That's not the purpose of the Mishnah. Brevity is its ultimate. Given the Asham Gzeh is the kapara, so the Ashamas are there for kapara. Like psikale. If we didn't want to learn it, because they don't have to break it down. So what do you tell me? So let's think in logic. You tell me if the purpose of a carbon is to be an enabler, and it wasn't able to be an enabler, then it's possible. So what about those kapanas where the purpose is to be a kapara? If you weren't able to do the kapara, they should also be possible. And yet you say that all Hashamas, what do you just say? Hasham Gzeilus, Hasham Yilas, you did let Ishma, it's kosher. What do you mean? The whole purpose is to be mechaper you on the Aveda you did, but it didn't. It won't be mechaper you because you did let Ishma. So how come that kosher? What's a chilik? A master or a mechaper? If it doesn't serve its purpose, then it doesn't serve its purpose. For the Gemara, it didn't achieve its end. No, the keeper didn't do its end either. So Gemara says an interesting thing. Rabbi Yirmiyah comes along and says there's a chilik between an enabler and a mechaper, and that is Matzina. We find in the Torah, we find in halacha shechilik hakasa be mechaprin or be machshirin. What do we see? Mechaprin izbu da'asil chamisa. I'll cite you an example where you bring a kapara even though the person who needs that kapara already passed away. You still bring it. In other words, even though it's not really achieving its purpose, once the person passed away, it's found. Yeah, or it'll go down, but whatever it is, but it's not achieving its purpose, and yet we still bring it. Mashenke machshirin less buru. But when it comes to machshirin, if the whole purpose is being enabler, if there's no purpose, if there's no purpose, he won't bring it, and therefore there's a chilik, and that's why a machshir, if it doesn't serve its purpose, like the shmoi, it's possible, but a mechaper if like the shmoi, it's still kosher. What's the story? Where do you see that a mechaper you bring l'chayda the heichatois hametzas? We say if the owner is in his chaper already or the owner is dead, we say you don't bring it, you let the chatas die. Where do you see an example? So it's a fascinating thing here. Now we learned in the Mishnah. Isha, if a woman, so maybe chatas, a woman. We're talking about a woman who gave birth has to bring a carbon chatas after the 80 days or whatever it is, after the 40 days, and now she brings two kabbanas, to bring a chatas and an oil. Now, usually you would think that the chatas is the sin, is for her, for the sin, and more need we talk about what the sin is, and the oil is a doira and a matana. So Rashi explains that no, here's the opposite. The chatas is what enables her to eat from kachim and everything else, and the oil is the kapara. The chatas here is the machtir, and the oil is the kapara. And it calls Gemara in Christus, we'll see that what the chatas is machtir her lechol bekachim, to eat kachim, and therefore automatically then we ask. So we see. So why bring an oil? What's the purpose of an oil really? Must be if the chatas does twofold. Say it's a machshir, say it's a mechaper. You don't need the oil. The oil must be lechaper, because it says echel lechatas ve'echel oil. So here's fakir, right? So bear that in mind. So now let's go to the dinner. We had this Mishnah. It said we had in Kedusha as well. Now we learned regarding shibud the Raisa. We learned the Mishnah. Ha'isha shevi a chatosa meisa. She brought a carbon chatas, which is the machshir, and then she died. Yivi yoshna lasa. They bring her oil. Now the oil is the kapara. What's the point? She passed away. You still bring it. But if I lost her, she brought the oil, the kapara, umesa, and she died. Now what's left? The chatas, which is a machshir. You don't bring the chatas. What does he call from here? That a machshir, once he passed away, there's no point in bringing it. No, once it serves no purpose, there's no point in bringing it. I'm a chaper, even if it doesn't serve a purpose, it still has a carbon. So that's why by Asham Gzeil, Asham Ilis, even though Leila Shmai, it's not possible.
Can you say it serves as a kapara for the neshama?
Once a person passes away, there's nothing to do. Only we say it's Shulchan brings out Hiddush Kippur then why you give tzedakah yiskis for tzedakah, and the idea of tzedakah is that the exclusive of tzedakah maybe is a little mechaper. I was saying.
Same idea, no?
It sounds like it's only tzedakah. I don't know. So anyway, I'll take a share. I'll learn that next year in the school with my father. It doesn't say that. I don't know. You limit that thing, but. Good question anyway. If that's your whole raya, machshir nami mi less budos achamisa. I will show you that machshirin also comes achamisa. And if you still bring the carbon, even though it serves no purpose, it refutes your whole, undermines your whole vart. Where do you see that? Now a nazi brings three kabbanas. A proper nazi brings three kabbanas, not the one who's tummy brings an asham. I remember we take about a chatas and oil and the shlamim, and then he takes a haircut, and that haircut he takes the hair and he puts it under the shlamim, burns it in the fire, and he cooks the shlamim, and that's the three things. And then you're able to drink wine again, and all the you're back to society. So what happened the following? Machshin nami let's go but nami like the following. Look at the Mishnah. A guy set aside money for naziris, but he didn't specify which of these three kabbanas. Now each carbon has very different dinim, and he doesn't have. He doesn't say I'm not going to use any other money. This money is covered. He could bring more money in to buy other kabbanas. Could be this money will be used for the oil. Could be it'll be used for the shlamim. Could be used for the chatzas. Doesn't say. On the one hand, we don't want you to have a no from it because there's an oil there, but we don't know if it's really the money is going to be used for an oil. Why is it no me'il here? This money can be used to buy, and now we know by kachim kalim, it does not belong. When is the me'ila? When it belongs to the base of Mikdash, and therefore you're stealing, using for your own benefit. By shlamim, it's the other way around. By all other kabbanas, once you sprayed it, there's no longer me'ila. By kachim kachim. By kachim kalim, all the way around. A shlamim, kozman, you didn't bring it, it's kachim kalim, it's the base of Mikdash. Once you spray the blood, then the emurin, the parts that belong to the mizbech, only there's me'ila. Now, before it's in a state of money, there's no meal because maybe you use all the money for shlamim. The other kabbanas you use other money. What happens, Mace? The person died. He stopped, had money. He didn't specify what's what. He didn't say what's a chatzas, what's an oil shlamim. Then yiplu nedava. Then what you do is you put it in the 13 shayfers there in the dava, and that's what you do. What about mifuroshin? He specified $100 for chatzas. Each $100 is for a different carbon. He specified. So to make chatzas. What do you do with the chatas? Is the chatas and chaper bala? It's meses. Is yolich liyama melech? You bring it to the yama melech, and it's not only, it doesn't only cover the actual carbon and the chatas, but even the money that was meant to use for chatas goes in the same place. Let me sasla. Loy nenin v'loy marlin. There's no. You shouldn't have the hanam rabbanon, but there's no meila here. Why is no meila? Because it's never going to end up to be a carbon. It's going to be thrown away, tossed away. Okay. The money set aside for the oila. You should buy an oila. As is by an oila, there's mila, and this money is consecrated as the oila money. Behem, and you mila. The mei shlamim, the money of her shlamim, is yavi behen shlamim. You buy a shlamim with it, but the shlamim, the shalmi naz is different than ordinary shlamim. Ordinary shlamim is 2 days a night. Shalmi naz is only 1 day in the night. So you should have now the shalmi naz as well. You have to, besides the nesachim, you also have to bring the lechem. So he says, "It ain't tuna lechem because lepoil. Why don't you bring the lechem here?" So Rashi says an interesting reason, and Teisa says it's important that Rashi's reason because it said, "What do you do with the bread? You have to wave it and put it on the kape nazir. There's no nazir to put on his hand." And the reason why that's important is because you have to wonder, so why nesachim yeah, and lechem no. So Teisa says because there's another reason. The lechem you push it in the mitzvahs, you can't. Now, shlamim. What's the role of oil shlamim? Okay, chatas is a sin, and Elazar Akapar said the sin is that you made a shvu. You don't want to, partake in wine, all that. But the oil shlamim. What's the oil shlamim? They're machshirim you. They enable you to start drinking wine again to mitam mason. They're machshirim. And yet the nazir died, and we're still bringing it up. Isn't that clear? That even machshirim, even though it doesn't serve its purpose because he's dead already, you'll still do it. So according to your word. Papa said, said the following. This is what he meant to say. Let's fine tune, tweak a little bit what he said. We don't find hechche kavua the bola achamisa, or the nazir hechche she'ena kavua. If something is a definitive hechsher, like the ashram of a mitzvah, the ashram of a nazir, this has a purpose, and the purpose of the ashram nazir is so that he can start counting again, to recalibrate. Ashram mitzvah is that he can eat kachim or go back to the mach. So there, if there's no purpose, we don't bring it anymore. Over here, which of these 3 animals is actually the one that's going to be the enabler here? The din is b'di'evid, which if you only did one of them, and I don't care which one, even if you only did the chatas, you're already allowed to drink wine and all that. So therefore, there's no specific enabler here. There's no specific machshir here. What is it? The Amamah could be learned that I don't care which carbon it is. If you shaved on any one of them, you're yaitzer. So therefore, there's no definitive machshir here. It could be the chatzah of the machshir. So quickly, Gemara says it ends over here. Makes me ask you one quick question. Asham it says about Asham Mitzayda Shenishchit. It says in the Brayse clearly on Asham of Mitzayda Shenishchit Shalei Lishma. Now remember, Rav said before that the Asham of a Mitzayda is an enabler. If a person passed away, is possible. So what it says there, an Asham of Mitzayda is shenishchit shalei lishmai. You did a shalei lishmai. Or you should nitin b'domai al gabi b'hainis, or you didn't place it on his thumbs or toes. Hareze oile legabi mizbech. You bring it on the mizbech. V'to nesachim, and what it has a din of an asham mitzayda requires an tzachim, but you achieve nothing because the tzarich asham achalach shirei. If you didn't put it on the b'hainis, you didn't achieve anything. But it says you got to continue. You just said your principle was that if you're an enabler and you're not doing it enabling, it's possible. So l'chayda, what's going on? It's leilishma. You didn't do the b'hainis. It should be possible. You're not. And it said the tzarich asham achalach shirei. You still need another asham. You need nothing. The youth to the Rav, it plugs up Rav. Teshuvah says, I don't know what exactly. Sometimes we say Rav Tanu Polig, and sometimes we just accepted that youth to the Rav. He doesn't know what the rule is. When. Okay, think tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.